This was dressed as a miracle. It's just a murder. And I solved murders.
I am Rian Johnson, and I wrote and directed Wake Up, Dead Man. And I'm here at the IndieWire Studios in New York, and we're going to talk about my new movie on the Filmmaker Toolkit podcast.
I think one of the first things that people are going to notice just even the first few minutes of this is it, in some ways, just the world feels like a return, maybe visually, maybe after being on that like island or whatnot. and obviously, and there's something a little gothic. Was that something like a conscious choice just in terms of setting and world? Or is that just the nature of these things to like kind of go back to this kind of wooden gothic world?
Tuck it back in. Well, the second one was kind of very specific. Second one was kind of, I'd say the majority of, if you look at the murder mystery spectrum, most of them take place in more woody kind of greens and browns. And then there's a really specific slice of it, which is, Last of Sheila and the film of Evil Under the Sun, kind of the blue and white vacation movie. So, I don't know. It is kind of a return, but it's also the second one was a little bit of just a vacation. And now we're back.
I feel like through these movies I've learned more about these types of books, you know?
Yeah.
It's a little bit of it, but help me understand, what is it? It's called a locked door mystery. This is like a subgenre of these types of books.
It's kind of a specific. So there's the locked door mystery. There's the offshoot of that, which is the impossible crime. But starting with the locked door mystery, it's it's kind of exactly what it sounds like. It's there's a guy goes into a room, shuts the door, locks the door behind him. No other entrances into the room. They hear a thud. They break the door down, and the guy is there with a knife in his back or something. No, they do it. And then the impossible crime, which is kind of like that, except it's not necessarily in a locked room. It's like there's a great one that John Dixon Carr wrote called The Problem of the Wire Cage, where this is a good example. There's a clay tennis court on like an English manor, and it has just rained, and so any footsteps will be like visible in it, but it's completely clean except for a guy strangled right in the middle of it. How did he get there? And so they're kind of like these little chess puzzles, sort of. And they're a little subset of the mystery genre.
And you wanted to tackle that one.
I was interested in it, although it's actually, they don't tend to be my favorite mysteries. Like, I love John Dixon Carr because I love his writing. I love his characters. I love the atmosphere he creates. He specializes in locked door mysteries. And the thing with locked door mysteries, the reality is, because it is like a chess puzzle, there's only a limited amount of pieces you're working with.
Yeah.
So it tends to always be a variation of either the timeline was messed with or there's some kind of gadget. Like back in the old days, the old thing was like a revolver in a grandfather clock or something. The build up always tends to have all this potential of wonderful mystery. Even when the ending is genius and like well conceived, it's kind of like revealing a magic trick. It is always a little bit of a letdown. So, but I was curious to try it because our movie's set in a church, and the notion of the impossible, this thing that's presented as something that is beyond the realm of physical possibility, that seemed like that could gel well with themes of faith and notions of miracles and all that good stuff you get with a good clerical mystery.
To understand this case, you need to look at the myth that's being constructed. A man gives a sermon. He then, in plain sight of everyone, walks into a sealed concrete box. And 30 seconds later, that man is lying dead. A classic impossible crime.
I mean, you absolutely 100 pull it off, so don't give the impression that you don't, but there is something about this that does feel, there's something about this type of story that feels that like one hand tied behind your back, and it feels like that's something that you also enjoy.
Yeah.
I read somewhere that I read a quote of yours somewhere. You kind of only get excited when you don't know if it's going to work.
Yeah, you got to be a little scared, I think, whenever and anyone who makes anything, you got to, I don't know, I feel like you're doing the wrong thing if you know you can do it. You got to be trying to do stuff and that was definitely the case with this. This was tough, man. This was a tough one.
Have you ever abandoned a Knives Out? Early in the phase of like, I want to do this one or something like that?
I haven't. There's other movies that I've started, right? I was writing this sci-fi thing for a while after Looper that I just couldn't crack. And I could crack the plot of it, but it was there. I couldn't figure out what the movie was actually about. And so anyway, I've abandoned other stuff. I haven't yet with one of these. I have other roads I've gone down with and Benoit Blanc mysteries that just I'm like, no, I'll do this instead. But I've never fully hit a brick wall. I will someday. I promise.
I don't want this to sound too mundane, but I'm always fascinated by how, as an audience member, I go into this knowing what you're going to do. Do you know what I'm saying? And you get me every time. And there's an element of the puzzle pieces, the twists that have to be so spot on, or you have to. I know we'll talk about writing, but like, what is even the process for you to come up with the puzzle, like the puzzle pieces of this, or the twist? Is there something where you have to come up with like 100 options to find like one that works?
Well, I mean, the reality, not to kind of like turn the lights on in Space Mountain a little bit, but the reality let's ruin everything. Come on. It's going around these days. So the reality is, I mean, the puzzle aspect of it is, I don't want to say like the easiest part because it is, there's a lot of work that goes into it. The reality though is, you're, for me, it is, I write in notebooks. I spend the first 80% of the time structuring. So to figure out, okay, I need this payoff here so I can plant this clue here. That for me, it's like working on a crossword puzzle. Like that is, kind of, if not the easy, kind of the fun part. But the thing that actually produces the effect you're talking about, where the "oh, you got me" effect, I think is much more a product of story in the traditional sense than puzzle solving and clues and plot. You kind of just come up with whatever you need to plot wise that is going to work and make sense, but that's not going to land unless it's also hitting you with a gasp, hitting you with a laugh, hitting you with an emotional effect. And so really all the work goes into sculpting the shape of it, but that shape is not the puzzle or the plot.
It's the character and where we are.
It's exactly that. It's who do you care about, what do they want, and what's keeping them from getting it, which is, it's the basic building. It's the amino acids of any story.
Why did you want a priest?
There's a lot of reasons why I want, and that was kind of like the fundamental thing I started with. I grew up very Christian. I wasn't Catholic. I was Protestant, kind of what we would now term evangelical, and I wasn't just like, socially very involved in the church or my parents dragging me to it. It was I was very, very, very I was very Christian. I defined my whole life was kind of framed through a relationship with God. And it was that way for me up through my early 20s. And I'm not anymore. I've fallen away from it in life. But anyone who was very religious in a deeply personal way will tell you it sticks around, or it's something that you're constantly wrestling with. And obviously culturally right now, as having grown up very specifically kind of in that evangelical moment of the rise of Christianity, especially in the political right in America, and being very much a part of that when I was a kid, and still having family members I care about who have those beliefs. It's something that it is very personal for me. So part of that was that. The other element of it, though, is, which may be a little less interesting, but still for me kind of cool. There is a a whole category of clerical mysteries. Christie wrote, Murder at the Vicarage, but also G.K. Chesterton's Father Brown mysteries are fascinating in the way that they kind of meld whodunit puzzles with these little morality plays and talk about human nature. And Father Brown himself, it's very interesting the way that his kind of superpower in terms of solving crime is not understanding holiness, it's understanding the opposite. It's understanding human fallibility, and it's understanding how humans are essentially flawed, sinful creatures, and not looking away from that. That's what gives him actual perception. So anyway, it's
I want to talk about what's going on right now, because these movies you are so putting them in the present day.
Yeah.
That first scene with LeBlanc and Josh O'Connor's character, I'll be honest, I didn't know what you just shared with me, but that when I was watching that, I was like, this feels like Ryan's having a conversation with himself.
That's what it is. That's exactly what it is. Yeah, I've got. Yeah, so I mean,
because I could definitely, there was like, so I could, there was both sides of that.
Yeah, man. I mean, so Josh O'Connor plays this character Judd, who's a priest, who is kind of, he's a man who genuinely wants to be as more Christ-like and wants to bring kind of everything that Christ actually talked about and stood for. He wants to put that into the world. Blanc is coming in. The detective Benoit Blanc is coming into it with a very cynical. Sounds like it's kind of dismissive of it. He has a very hard stance against the church, and these two men form a friendship, and they really collaborate over the course of it. And absolutely, it's kind of nakedly the two things inside of me kind of going at it.
Here's what's gonna happen. Benoit freaking Blanc and I are gonna ask you all some questions, and you're gonna answer them. We're gonna get to the bottom of who killed Monsignor Wicks and why, and then that's it.
Now, who wants to go first?
Yeah.
I think best because it's not an antagonistic anti-religion thing. I would say LeBlanc is kind of the reasoned atheist approach of like a respectful 100%. But
also very clear-eyed about all the ills in the world that the church has brought about. So he's coming into it with a perspective I think a lot of people watching the movie will share. So is Judd. And so and for me, both of them, I don't know. I think that's also what was interesting to me. It wasn't like it was loaded dice. I have both of those things inside me, and genuinely to set them at each other, that always leads to the most interesting relationships on film. And
their partnership is kind of like a welcoming, holding every audience by the hand on the way into this thing. I hope so. I mean, at the same time, it's not, you don't want to, if you're lukewarm, I will spit you out. You don't want to be, you don't want to just be making a movie trying not to offend anyone. I don't think this movie does that, but I do think it, I hope, because it's coming from me, it's got genuinely both of those things that it's trying to present and butt them up against each other. I want to talk about the process you go through for creating the suspects, the ensemble, the first movie, it's always the family or the guests at the whatever that island is. It's interesting because I pulled a couple quotes from things that you had said because I think this might be tied to it, is when you're writing one of these, I'm looking at something I'm angry about or thinking about and wrestling with, something I'm deeply caring about, and I can dive in deeply using the other thing as a delivery device. And then also that it's unapologetically, you think of these Knives Out movies, which do have this kind of like old world Agatha Christie thing, but they're unapologetically set in the present. Yeah. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that in context of creating the parishioners, that core of Wick's flock there. That's kind of like in this, the kind of, I guess, to become the suspects too. Well, I mean, in a way, it's very modern. In a way, it's doing kind of what Christie did. I mean, the reality is that Christie did this with her books. They just were tuned into her present time as opposed to ours. She was never writing kind of gilded little timeless, things. And so that's kind of what we try to do. So
you know, the each of these movies kind of always has something it's exploring, poking at, trying to get at. I mean, they're big entertainments, but I do, you know, I don't think I could sit down to write something if I wasn't, you know, like you said, angry about something and wanting to not like, God forbid, not do a message, but wanting to kind of get my hands in the dirt with something and figure something out a little better for myself. So each one of the suspects ends up being essentially a fragment of how I want to come at this topic that the thing is sort of about. And that's in a way how I kind of end up dividing up, and also how I make sure they're all going to have their own personality and they're all going to feel distinct. The best way to do that is to have them all have their own perspective on what the central hub of the story is.
Was there a conscious effort, or is it just the way that this worked in the story, that there's almost like a pulling back of LeBlanc a little bit, a later appearance, a little bit like maybe less of a guide? Is this?
Well, I mean,
or am I wrong about that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think he enters later into Blanc enters later than he does in the other movies. But I think once he enters, he's absolutely more of kind of the leading presence than he was in the first movie, and in some degree he's more central than he was in the second movie too. He definitely has more of a personal arc in this one than the first two. So yes and no. I mean, to me, it's there are many ways to use a detective character in a whodunit, and this is, I would say, actually much more the traditional way. Usually, what happens, which I kind of skirted in the first two movies, but usually this is how it works. You get the whole first act without the detective, and then the murder happens at the end of the first act, and then the detective shows up. So that's kind of the more straightforward way of doing it, kind of. So I don't know. Yeah.
Please, I've only gotten to see this once, and with these movies, it definitely helps to see twice. So please wave me off if I'm wrong about this. But am I wrong in the sense that I always had felt the Daniel Craig character was 3 steps ahead of me, and I knew that. And it felt like in this movie, and maybe there's a little bit of he's not.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe even, and we could talk about the shot in the woods, there might even be a moment I step in front of him for a second.
Yeah.
Is that, am I wrong? Again, I've only seen it once, and there's always like a play acting thing with that. But I mean, am I?
No, it's absolutely true, because I mean, from Blanc's introduction in this movie and his first conversation with Judd, you see that Blanc is coming in with a certain amount of bravado that reason is going to be able to just sweep away the cobwebs. There's nothing else he needs to understand about this world. He can come in and just, like someone solving a crossword puzzle, this can be fixed and figured out. And I think for him, part of his journey is realizing there is something he needs to kind of figure out about this. He needs to engage with this, and he's going to have to learn something by the end of this. And so I think because of that, it makes sense to kind of feel him trying to gain purchase in this the way he usually does, and suddenly realizing there's something that is I can't quite grok here. And I don't know. I think that's also fun because, you know, you talk about also a murder mystery's relation to religion. You have an essential thing where the detective is always sort of the godlike character who's going to come in and fix everything and set the moral universe back on its feet again by the end of the movie. Or by the end of the story. So that ends up being, I don't know, for me, that ended up making sense in terms of Blanc's journey in it.
Just to clarify, I think our audience knows this. This is something you listen to or watch after you see it, and we're not going to drop this until it hits Netflix. And so we'll write. But so with that, so I want you to feel comfortable talking about this.
Yeah.
What about that woods scene? Because that seems like a big moment, and the background. I mean, it's beautiful. You and Steve knocked it out of the park with that. But it also feels that felt like something different for me in a really fun way.
So, and again, we're in spoiler territory.
Yes.
So go see the movie.
Yes.
It's on Netflix. Go watch it right now.
We have listeners that understand that.
Okay, good.
We say that up top too.
So you're talking about the resurrection scene. You're talking about the.
I was also talking about even just the guy with the lantern walking behind them, which feels to me as a signal of the first thing that we're.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that whole sequence, it's kicked off by, I mean, the other thing that this thing is sort of about, and it's reflected in Josh Brolin's character Wicks, Monsignor Wicks, who's, it's reflected in the way that he runs the church. It's also, though, there's a mirror image of it in the way Blanc is coming at it. There's a notion of team sports, and as opposed to trying to serve the person in front of you, and approach them with love and empathy, and actually, actually serve them in terms of, from Judd's perspective, in terms of leading them towards, them towards the teachings of Christ. Notion of team sports playing, the notion of us against them, the notion of being under siege, which, for me, growing up as in the church that I did, that was a big part of what was drilled into you, is the notion that it's us against them, and we're under siege here, and this is war, and we have to, they're out to get us. And the thing is, the us against them notion is exactly where Blanc's coming from also. He's like, we have to break these people down and find the truth from them, whether they want it or not. And we're going to find that's the whole thing, is to find the guilty person and bring them to justice. And there's a moment halfway through the movie where Judd realizes that is not what I am here to do. If I am here as a Christian, that is not what Christ has called me to do. It's not for me to find, the person who's against me and take them down. What I'm here to do is to turn the other cheek and to serve the world, and so Judd kind of gets pulled into Blanc's game in reaction to pushing back against Wicks, and realizes he's on just the other side of the coin. And so he has a reset moment halfway through where he realizes, I can't be, even if it means I'm going to get convicted of this, I can't be part of this game of trying to track down the guilty and punish them. So, and that kind of kicks off this sequence that leads to the resurrection of Monsignor Wicks. Yeah. Leads to the dead man waking up.
It's perfect. It's perfect. This is going to sound like a weird question. Obviously, you've been writing your whole adult life scripts. Have you figured out how to be funnier with your life? This movie is funnier.
That's
like
good.
The lines, but there feels like something. There feels like something with the writing and the comedy. I mean, is this something that you can actually feel? I mean, not to say your films have always had a sense of humor, but is that something where do you feel yourself getting stronger as a writer when it comes to?
I'm getting funnier.
No, but I'm serious. There's setups and things. The Jeffrey Wright character, the confession. I mean, but I mean, again, there's always been good quibs here. But is this something where you actually feel like that muscle developing a little bit?
I don't know. I mean, first of all, I'm really happy to hear that, because when I was writing it, I'm like, oh, this is a lot darker in tone. Will this still feel?
Well, the comedy comes from that.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I would say with this movie specifically. Maybe and if the humor lands better, I think maybe it's because it's coming from a more deeply rooted place, and because for me, that's always where the best comedy comes from, is through not through jokes or gags, but through the characters actually dealing with situations in ways that we recognize, whether those ways are flawed or whatever. And so for me, I think it's me deeply. I do feel like I deeply understand the characters in this story in a way that maybe that's part of what makes the. But I'm very happy.
I did listen. Jeffrey Wright.
Yeah.
Truth saying, hearing the priest talk like that. Brolin in the confession with the masturbation, and Glenn Close Marta. The way that visual gag of even just her appearing, these are things right in the beginning. That's those are things that you also can keep using, and they keep getting funnier.
Well, there's also, and do you remember? I don't know if you remember. What was that movie, The Madness of King George? They have the big show and putting the crown on the king and everything, and then they cut to behind the scenes they're cleaning up after, and the servants are just tossing the crown around and throwing it into I feel like if you grew up actually Christian, I feel like there's a lot of humor that you find, and you don't handle the notion of Christianity or your faith or the church itself with holy kid gloves. I think that if you grew up outside of the church, maybe you think there are more sacred cows in it than, and in a way there are, but there's also a lot of gallows humor that you have as a Christian. There's a lot of, I don't know, there's a lot of laughing in church. There's a lot of farting in church that is a big part of being a Christian. That's what helps get you through the day, I think. And so I think possibly the fact that I don't know, that I know that from experiencing it is part of that,
I was going through before we leave writing, I was going through some interviews from you from the last few years prepping for this. And one thing that you have said a few times that I want to drill down on, because I think I would like to know how you do it. You suddenly just start writing faster, almost as if it was a decision on your part. You describe it almost as like a conscious decision of like, and
yeah,
I don't know, I'm sitting in the room with other writers, I would like to write faster. But what, because the writing has gotten stronger, if anything. I'm wondering what that was, because it feels like it was kind of a big thing for you to unlock in the last few years.
Yeah, it absolutely has been. I mean, and, I think there's a couple things. First of all, it is just, I gave myself a lot of leash in the early days. I would think about a story for like 2 years. Looper, I was like, thinking about that for like 2-3 years before I wrote it. There's a few things. I mean, first of all, it's just, you get older, you realize time is the only real asset that you've got under your belt.
Commodity.
Yeah, it's the only real commodity and thing of value. Also, the fact that I'm in, at least for the moment, a very blessed, lucky position of being able to make something that I write means that I also have collaborators that are waiting for me to, if I take 2 years off, it means that everyone's kind of taking 2 years off.
Versus the idea, this thing's got to be perfect when it goes out into the world, ready to go. And this is like, no, this is getting made in a year and a half.
That's a little bit of that. But honestly, though, it's also just kind of getting my head out of my own ass and just kind of realizing, you know what, this isn't taking it this long because it's a work of staggering genius. It's taking this long because I'm not kicking my butt enough. And if I just sit down and do it and push it out and just do the work a little faster, it'll get done a little faster.
And I think also probably one thing I've heard a lot of people say is getting to the rewrite part of it faster. Versus try like that.
I thought that's hard for me. That's a reason I still spend 80-90% of the process in notebooks, because the instant it's script pages, I have a much harder time rewriting it and reworking it. I like to do as much of the revision as possible. But in outline form, the other thing you do realize more and more, though, is just, how it's not a thing until it's script pages. So inevitably I do that, and then there's a lot of revisions that's happening on the page anyway. So
when you were on Toolkit last time for Glass Onion, you were talking to Jim, my LA colleague, and you talked to something about the formal challenge of that one. These large atriums and how to frame, and you almost had to go back to masters and look at it. I'm curious, what did this one come with any particular formal challenges that you had to like kind of solve in that same way?
I'd say the challenge with this was much more in the writing phase of it. I think not that, the directing I'm really proud of. I'm really proud of Steve Yedlin, my DP's work. I'd say this movie, more than the first two, is a lighting movie, and we're on a lot of sets and going for a much more tonally distinct kind of gothic vibe. And I think Steve really did amazing work with this one. But unlike Glass Onion, where there were lots of scenes where there were like 10 people in a big room for like 10 pages. That's tough. There was less of that in this one. And so in that regard, this one was a little more fun in terms of actually shooting it.
In that sense of having someone like me as an audience member wondering, is there going to be a resurrection for 10 minutes? I imagine that's how are you going to get me there for 10 minutes? Is that's a little bit of like where I could fall on my face.
You got to, but that's also in the writing, that's how it's all structured out. You lay out the bones first,
there was something where when you were describing Poker Face, you were saying one of your approaches is follow your bliss on that one. You know, I still love one of the things that you said about Brothers Bloom. You know, I'd been broke and stuck in LA throughout my 20s, so I wrote a big adventure in order to have a big adventure.
That's right.
Lots of stories you and the cast told from the first Knives Out of that house and being able to turn the bottom into like a place where all these people can hang out instead of disappearing in the trailer.
Yeah.
And it feels like, and I know you take your filmmaking very seriously, but I mean, your job.
Yeah.
There does feel, and I say this because I do a lot of interviews, and agony seems to be a common ingredient when people talk about it. It's important to you that these things are fun. I mean, it's a lot of work.
I take these things being fun very seriously.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. It sounds like.
Yeah, but also not just these movies because they're big fun, you know, ensembles or whatever, because they're these, you know. But generally, I feel like I feel like work should be play, and that's how the best work is accomplished. And that doesn't mean you don't sweat it. That's not to mean that there isn't, you know, agony involved. There definitely 100% is, especially with this one. In the writing, it was plenty of agony. But I also just fundamentally think that you're going to do your best work when you are feeling like you're a kid in a sandbox. I feel like that's when the most creative. And that's when also you're the most fearless. You know, that's when the more you can get fear out of your process on all fronts, the more chances you'll feel comfortable taking, the more you'll push yourself, I think. So I think maybe that's part of what, you know, when we talk about having a good time making these, it's not just like to have fun. The practical element of that is if everyone feels comfortable, then fear steps out of the room, and then you can actually then you can trash it, you know.
It also, I think there's an element, right, of if you're around people and there's an environment, you're not feeling friction too. There's like people tend to be more, I don't know, it feels as if I had a friend who made comedies, and he used to always say, I failed with those people because I wasn't funny around them, you know, and like, it's something. There's something about that it feels. Yeah. You know, I imagine you can be stressed out around a lot of stars and their demands, and if they're all just hanging out and having a good time, it's a little bit. It's not driving the ship in quite the same way.
Yeah, I think the tone on the set is a big deal, you know, and for me also, whether it leads to a better outcome or not. Who wants to live their life? And, this is what we do. This is what we get to do. And yeah, I don't know. Who wants to be stressed out and angry on the set?
So where were they hanging out on this one?
So we had to work a little harder. We built tents actually on the soundstage that were like the green room, because there wasn't like a natural place. And so we're like, this is important. So we created it. Mm-hmm. So there were these kind of funky tents on set that they all hung out at. And then sometimes when we were shooting in the church, everyone would hang out in the pews, and we have a lot of napping in the pews going on. That's good. Yeah.
Am I wrong? This is the end of the Netflix deal?
Well, we had a deal for 2 with Netflix, and you know whether we renew it with them or make it elsewhere, it's still to be seen. But yeah, this was the end of our 2-picture deal with them.
And you and Ram hold on to the IP. This is like you can keep doing this and take this where you want.
Yeah, yeah.
Is it something that you want to keep doing? I mean, because it feels like it's something that's repeatable, and why not, right?
I absolutely. I mean, not next, I think. I'm writing like an original thing to do next, but
I heard he might do another sci-fi. Is that right?
It's sci-fi adjacent. It's not really sci-fi. It's kind of adjacent. Yeah, yeah.
Damn you, Deadline.
What's that? Sorry. I might have said the word sci-fi in there. It's not pure sci-fi. It's more of like a paranoid thriller, if anything. But
Deadline's a PMC company, and they do good work. Even if they misquote Rian Johnson.
Called the FCC. But look, my attitude is still the same towards them, which is as long as it can be the way it's been so far, where with every one of these, I feel terrified getting into it because I don't know whether we can pull it off or not. If it's an idea that's not just different enough, but different enough for me and for Daniel, and challenging enough, then I can think of nothing better than to keep coming back and making one of these, every once in a while for the rest of my life.
I want to preface this question because I really do not want to make hay about, there's been stories about it in the last year and so about Netflix and the theatrical and you wanting more theatrical for this one, and it's going to get a little window.
Mm-hmm.
I am, and you've laid out your opinions about it very clearly, and I don't need to. We've written that story. I don't need that. But I am curious, though. There is something here. You clearly are making big screen experience. Is this thing? You want to see this movie in a theater. Yeah. In fact, I was happy that the press screening was packed when I went instead of just being me. I am curious if there's something of. I think we're both very concerned about the theatrical experience and believe that has a future. Do you feel like as a filmmaker, though, also sometimes when making, there's a danger, and I'm starting to see it in my appetite of watching streaming, there's a danger of also from a filmmaking standpoint of the language and the type of story that goes to streaming and where movies are going. I'm saying it's like I think everybody's going to enjoy Knives Out no matter where they're going to see it, but one can imagine that being a theatrical.
Right.
And if you're not thinking of that,
yeah,
there's a danger of what those stories become.
I don't know. That's maybe a bit out of my purview, just because it's hard for me to imagine. I don't know. I feel like when you're, I'll say for me, not you, because the answer is I don't know. You may be totally right. I know for me, it's impossible for me to think in terms of, well, this is for a streamer, so we have to hit this sort of thing or whatever. Or we have to. For me, it's so much. It takes so much mental capacity and work just to tell a story well in the way that I know how to tell it. The notion of then calibrating it to some idea of the end product. I know I could never do that. I don't know if any filmmaker could, but I know a lot of movies are made in a lot of different ways and by a lot of different processes. And so that may be something that's happening. I don't know.
Are you having fun producing more, like doing it with T Street
Well,
stuff?
So T Street, our company, yeah, I am, but I also should say it's my producing partner, Ram. Our producers at teaming T Street are the ones who are doing the actual work. I very much just get to be like the cool uncle who drops in and like hangs out on set for a day or gives notes. And in that capacity, I've loved it, but I don't want to give the illusion that I'm like, behind the desk all day actually doing the real work.
Because it feels to me when you Ram created that, and it's something that I was very hopeful. I love the Knives Out franchise, but there was something there with that first one. And I was really thinking that here was something you'd created, an original franchise that was something that was very medium size, like doable.
Yeah.
And it felt like with the success of that one and clearly how much Netflix loves it and the big deal you got, that there was a model there. And it felt like that's something that maybe even at the ethos of what you and Ron were doing when you're creating T Street, right?
I think it's less about the notion of, because I, even having accidentally sort of created one, I still kind of, pucker up at the notion of IP and the idea of creating something in order to be an ongoing thing. With this, it did end up being that, and it makes sense just because they're modeled off of Agatha Christie books. So the idea of it being a series. I will say, though, what connects for me with what you're saying is less about let's create things that can be series that can go forward, as opposed to let's find filmmakers with truly interesting voices who want to make commercial, for lack of a better word, movies, who want to make movies that play for audiences, and who, and I love movies that are, more arty kind of esoteric films. Or some of my favorite films are those, but I feel like part of our mission statement was let's make smaller and medium-sized movies that are made with a real point of view, that are doing interesting things, that are really trying to push everything forward, and that have the stated goal in mind of really working with audiences. So yeah, that connects with me about what you're saying, which is kind of what, I think everything that I've made to some degree is kind of aiming for that ethos.
All right. Well, congratulations on this one.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
I think this will do. It's on Netflix. Yeah, I can say this because it's on Netflix now. It
Yeah.
hit theaters right around Thanksgiving, and then it's Netflix December 12th. And I think people are really going to enjoy it.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.